Good morning, everyone. I'm Simon Fletcher. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the Small Cell Forum and also CTO of a consultancy called Real Wireless. And for me, I was very keen to chair this session because this is the crux of the matter in terms of the enterprise and industry user narrative around networks. We need to get a good handle on what the requirements are, and we've already heard in the earlier sessions that we've spotted in the forum over a couple of years now that there's a high risk of fragmentation, and we've got to understand where the common threads of requirements are as we go forward, so we can build templates, blueprints, a view in terms of common architectures, reusable components of the systems, so that we give the industry a chance to have economy of scale. That's very important. But we don't want to over-constrain the view of enterprise in terms of their needs. That's very important. So we need to treat that as a sort of an independent topic and listen very carefully. So let's kick off into this session on enterprise connectivity. And we're first of all going to have a keynote from Ericsson, Hammar, who's going to give us an overview in terms of the major movements in indoor.
Thank you very much, Simon. So a major moment for indoor. I think the neutral host and enterprise deployments will be driving small cells growth. So let's get started. First, if we look at the bigger picture a little bit, there are 6.8 billion people on the planet. 5.1 of them own a smartphone, or a mobile phone, I should say. But only 4.2 billion own a toothbrush. That's a bit strange. But I think one of the key reasons for the growth of mobile phones, and now later on also smartphones, is the versatility of smartphones, and you just use them for everything you actually do. When I came here this morning, I had a Teams call on my smartphone with the video and headset, and then I stopped for a coffee. I paid with my smartphone, and then when I entered the car park, I opened the barrier with my smartphone. And of course, my watch is connected to the smartphone. I'm sure that when I go on and in a few years' time buy my first AR glasses, they will be tethering to my smartphone. So digitalization of all industries and society in general is driving more usage of the smartphone, and the smartphone becomes like the centerpiece that for everything you do in your private life, but also for work. So that is like changing even faster now with the arrival of 5G. So talking about 5G in a bit of numbers, we are now adding 1 million subscribers to 5G networks every day. And by end of 2027, we'll have 4.4 billion 5G subscriptions globally, and 75% of the global population will be having 5G coverage. So this is the fastest mobile technology growth that we have seen so far. So where are all these subscribers using their phones? I think indoor is a good answer. We know that 80% of data is consumed indoor already, and that is not going to slow down. It's going to continue to that and maybe even grow further. But we also know that 40% of indoor users are not really happy with their experience. So we as an industry need to come together and build those networks and improve those networks indoor. I think that is also probably expectation that outdoor, yeah, you have good coverage. Then, of course, when you go indoor, you expect to have the same coverage and be able to do the same kind of things with your phone. But that's not the case today. So we still have a lot of work to do as an industry to improve that. So some of the trends that we see now happening, private networks are beginning to unlock tangible value for enterprises. So we see new use cases coming around in both manufacturing, healthcare, Industry 4.0, but also cloud gaming. So cloud gaming, smartphone is the most popular platform for gaming. And so far that has been done on Wi-Fi mainly, but that is going to change with 5G, because then you get an even better experience where you want to do your gaming anywhere, indoor as well as outdoor. We also see continued need for multi-operator support, because all these different indoor places, you have a need for lowest possible total cost of ownership, but also you need to have a multi-operator environment. You need to be able to connect whether you are with that operator or that operator with your subscription. So indoor connectivity is becoming even more important. If you look at the different segments and different type of buildings, you can see that there are some that are more towards the enterprise and public sector, like mission critical communication. Global headquarters need to have good connectivity indoor, of course. And we also see like conference venues like this, 5G connectivity is essential. We talked about smart manufacturing and Industry 4.0. That is now moving really fast in dedicated networks or private networks deployment using 5G and 5G standalone. Then we have also the consumer sector with subway stations, multi-operator environment like shopping malls and airports. So there are a lot of different areas that will benefit from connectivity and need good connectivity with 5G. So coming back to where we are with 5G today. So there are a lot of numbers of this on this slide here. And the yellow bars that you can see that are growing, they are speed test measurements. So if you have a mobile phone, you can do speed test, check what kind of speed you get from the network. Some people do that. And these are samples from 2019 to 2022. And you can see there are clusters started very early in China, Korea, also the US and some parts of Europe, but then it's growing very, very quickly in those areas and adding also Australia, Middle East, and now we also see some parts of Latin America and Africa starting with 5G. So this is like showing a little bit how fast it goes. So there are 200 mobile networks globally with that 5G with commercial service today. But only 20, so the second number there, only 20 of those are what we call 5G standalone. So what is the difference between the 200 and the 20? The 200 is what we call non-standalone. So why is that important? So non-standalone is basically mobile broadband. It's like one pipe that suddenly with 5G become bigger, so you get better throughput, more capacity. So it's like mobile broadband on steroids. But the business model, the use cases doesn't change. With standalone, everything is different. With standalone, it enables new use cases and new ways to monetize the mobile networks by CSPs and others. So the technology that comes with 5G standalone is called network slicing and edge compute. Those are maybe buzzwords that we have been talking about in the industry for quite some time, but I will try to explain a little bit more about what that is. So this is how we see that networks are going to be built in the next few years, and we have already started with this. So this is indicating then the slices in the network. So this is like a geographical area, which is the MNO or CSP have divided in industry 5G territory and a mixed 5G territory, and a residential 5G territory. And then they provide a slice that is called economy, mobile broadband economy, enhanced mobile broadband economy, which is similar to like best effort mobile broadband that we have today. There is also a slice that is called eMBB Premium. So that can secure a better service for maybe streaming video like Teams and Zoom to make sure that it's always possible to connect and carry on with your phone video conference. And then in the industrial 5G territory, we have time-critical communication. So this is a low latency, high reliable connectivity for industries. You could control cranes in a port. You can control machines in a factory by providing a slice with a specific spectrum that this enterprise and use case can leverage on. On the right-hand side, we have fixed wireless access slice. So that is for MNOs to provide fixed wireless access in maybe rural or residential areas using 5G. That could be with the new spectrum like 3.5, but also millimeter wave at the later stage. In the middle, we have a third slice called eMBB real time. So that is, you can say that that's a slice for gaming. That with really good like response time when you play games. So how will this work from a consumer and from a user point of view? I will just take two examples. In the bottom here, you can see Mira, Jenny, Carla, and Barry. I will take two of those and explain how that works. And then we can, if you want to, are interested, we can have a separate discussion later on, separately in our booth. So Mira, she is an office worker. On her mobile phone, she has a personal side with the different applications and a work side with other applications. When she uses the personal side of the phone, then she's connected to the cheapest subscription because she pays that by herself. So she wants to have an affordable subscription. So she's connected to the eMBB economy slice. When she do work tasks on her smartphone, then she switches to the work part of the phone, and then the applications under the work part will connect to the eMBB Premium to secure, because her company wants her to be able to do phone calls and video conferencing and other things wherever she is. So they are prepared to pay a little bit more for that service. So the MNO are selling two different subscriptions to the same phone. The other example is Jenny. She's a gamer. So she's also wants to have the cheapest possible subscription. So she's having an eMBB economy, but that doesn't really fit the gaming experience that she wants to have. So she's having on her phone what is called the boost button. So in her subscription is included 10 hours per month where she can use the eMBB Premium, or could also be the eMBB real time, depending on how much she wants to pay. So when she clicks that button, she plays for an hour, then that consumes like out of that 10 hours. And then she's connected to a different part of the network, basically. But it's the same network, but a different slice. So this is ways for MNOs to monetize 5G with network slicing. And the eMBB real time can also be connected to a game server that is closer to the user. So that's what we call mobile edge compute. So this opens up for new opportunities to differentiate the service offering for MNOs. So to summarize that, network slicing is really key, but it's not only key outdoor, of course. those network slices need to go indoor. So since 80% of the traffic is consumed indoor. So the indoor systems need to be complemented with more, like 5G, of course, upgraded to 5G, and adding more capacity. And here, the 3.5 gigahertz C-band spectrum will play an essential role. But there is an elephant in the room. So what is that? Where is the elephant? So the legacy indoor systems, in general, they don't support 3.5 gigahertz. They don't support 5G. They need to be modernized. So passive DAS or active DAS, there are a lot of work to do, and those are quite costly to upgrade. So what Ericsson has been doing, we have launched the radio dot system back in 2014 mainly for single operator use. Now we have the last couple of years we have invested heavily in making that available for multi-operator use. And that comes with two main developments. That is being able to connect any base station to our indoor system in a multi-operator setup, but also to develop the radio dots, the radio heads, with broader spectrum capabilities to support all MNOs in the country. It provides 50% lower capex compared to active DAS systems, upgrading with active DAS. And it increases network capacity. So when you install it the first time, you can select to have one cell for all the dots in the building. And then when you need more capacity, you can split them by software so that you multiply the capacity in the building. So it's a pay-as-you-grow model for capacity increase. It's a future-proof investment from that point of view. When you need more spectrum, more capacity beyond that, then you can add dots with other spectrum capabilities. For example, millimeter wave will starting now in enterprise, but will come to the public segment supported in our smartphones in a few years' time. So we think that we have something really good here. And in the multi-operator environment then, we have mainly two different ways of deploying it. Either you use the same spectrum for all MNOs, and then you basically connect to their core network directly. This is a very cost-effective way to deploy indoor systems. But I think on the right-hand side, on this picture, you have a more common model, which is where you have each MNO have use their own spectrum for their own subscribers, and you connect the base station to the indoor system in a traditional DAS type of way. If one or two or three of those are having Ericsson networks, Ericsson equipment in their network, they can connect directly via CPRI to our indoor radio unit. Otherwise, you go through the RF, with an RF signal to the indoor connect. But that is a very flexible solution. You can have all operators connecting over indoor connect with RF, or you can have a mix. So a bit of summary of the radio dot system, and you will be able to visit us in the booth, and welcome to visit us and talk to my colleagues and get a lot more details. But of course, we support now 5G mid-band together with two other FDD bands in one single unit. And that also supports enough spectrum so that you, with two of those dots, can provide all the capacity needed for all operators in the country, up to 4 operators. So this is providing then 5 times faster and 10 times more traffic than standard active systems, DAS systems, to half the TCO. So real 5G indicates the standalone not only we support the non-standalone that is out there today, but the 20 networks that I mentioned in the beginning with standalone, this is like fully supported, of course, in the radio dot system. Because we are using the same like software features and everything from our macro network also in the indoor. So that ensures feature parity. And of course now with the efforts we have done in R&D, we support the multi-operator and to a very low power consumption. Next step then with the millimeter wave, we have already now launched a millimeter wave product that supports 800 megahertz indoor. So that's like a massive capacity just with one small unit, and you can see it out in our booth as well. And this is now starting in enterprise market with private networks and maybe dedicated devices, but in the US is already in smartphones, and it will come in smartphone, millimeter wave support in smartphones in the next few years also in Europe. So our track record then in terms of deployment of a radio dot system, both in the single operator and multi-operator. We have Los Angeles Airport now covered with radio dot system, providing 5G connectivity to all the passengers and also the staff. We are just now building the indoor system for a major like stadium in Qatar that will be hosting a very famous football tournament later this year. And then, for example, here in London, we have several multinational enterprise offices using radio dot system for the 5G connectivity, or 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G connectivity, I should say. Because this is not only for 5G, this supports all the technologies from 2G onwards. And in the enterprise space and Industry 4.0, we have now completed the 5G coverage of the Mercedes factory in Germany together with Telefonica to build this smart manufacturing facility in Germany. So connecting the dots. So we provide then the radio dot system for CSPs, of course, seamless indoor and outdoor coverage and capacity with full feature parity compared to the outdoor network, macro network. Now we have developed also the neutral host support, very cost efficient, fully digital small cell sharing capabilities. And then we are targeting also the enterprise segment to really build resilient and reliable, secure solutions for indoor use cases. So what's next then? So network sharing we have talked a lot about. Network slicing I've also talked about. That will be the big thing coming, and the networks need to be prepared for that, both outdoor and indoor. Industry 4.0 standalone will provide that low latency, high reliability networks that are needed for manufacturing. Cloudification. So we are now investing a lot in building what we call Cloud RAN. So that is one of the pillars in Open RAN, where we are also a big contributor. So that's virtualizing the baseband or the VU, the DU and CU. Automation is also an area where we are investing. Neutral hosts need to be able to operate the network with a lean workforce. So automation is key. And that is also, you can say, the second leg of Open RAN with the service management and orchestration, where we are investing heavily. And then new spectrum, millimeter wave, but also industry spectrum or private spectrum, where we support already. I think we have here in the UK built a city network that we will talk about later, I think, using industry spectrum or private spectrum. So it's a bright future for indoor. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. We'll have a little panel. I'm hoping we'll have a panel at the end. We've got a lot of speakers, so we need to press on. So thank you very much, Hans. Now the next is Anne, who, as I said at the start, what we really need to do is be listening to people who are trying, new emerging users with interesting ways of trying to use the technologies that are being developed and we've just heard about. So let's hear from Anne from Liverpool, who's going to give us a useful insight on why she's experimenting with these technologies. Slides should move on. There we go.
Hello, everybody. I'm Anne Williams, and I'm a commissioner in adult social services. And you never thought you'd hear that today at a tech conference. What am I doing here? Well, we've been experimenting with all sorts of things to try and get our health and social care services better. And we've been successful as a DCMS 5G testbed and trial for health and social care. And the slide you can see there at the bottom are all the partners in our consortium. And the very end one of Telet Research, I don't know how many people know it, but they're the 5th mobile phone, GSMA recognised mobile phone company in the UK. So we're working with them. So when people say to me, oh, you're not working with a mobile phone company, I do put people right. So this is what we're doing, why we started this. I'm sorry to disappoint you all, but I don't really bother about small cells or 5G or whatever it is. I just needed the solution. So I'm interested in the connectivity, and I've been assured that what I need is small cells, and they do seem to be working. So what we found is that actually reliable, affordable connectivity is what I'm trying to actually achieve. And because that's a key barrier to introducing some of the new tech-enabled care solutions that people are wanting to do. So we've had a digital program, and we've tried all sorts of different equipment. I've had a LoRaWAN network funded through Europe, but the data packages aren't big enough on that network for voice. And we had an incident where a guy fell, pressed his button, and then the phone was ringing to check if he was okay. And when he was okay, and his daughter and he came to see me, and they were very, very forthright in how useless they felt the system was. So I learnt my lesson, and we've tried then to look for something that would carry voice as well. So one of the big problems that we face is increased data charges. And as we get more and more sophisticated equipment, which we want, the data usage of that equipment increases quite considerably, particularly for video, MRI scans, transfers, etc., real-time surgery, all the things that we've been hearing about for the last 5 or 6 years actually eat the data. And the current market is that you get charged per unit of data, and that isn't sustainable. So obviously the pandemic hit, and so we found that we needed more and more digital solutions in the health service, whether we went to virtual GP surgeries, etc., and it really had a huge impact. So Hans sort of showed, what you can do with a smartphone, but there are a lot of people who haven't got smartphones, and particularly older people who get their grandchild's their grandchild might get a new Apple phone, and then they'll set up grandma with their old phone, and quite a lot of those are not actually very smart. But the reason I'm here is the bottom bullet point on that one, which is the analogue telephone lines going off. I commission a telecare service. I've got 10,500 connections across the city, and 8,500 of those are analogue. So the telecare industry has really been slow to take on the digital agenda. So we're very tied to proprietary tech to install equipment, etc., and with SIM cards. So if I just change, which is what the industry is suggesting, all of what we've got at the moment and stick a SIM card in it all, which is going to cost me in itself, the running costs per annum are going to go up £600,000 a year. which is just to have the same old. So it's not really sustainable. So that's why we're looking for our own network. And actually, the more I get involved in the switch off from the analog lines and how disastrous it's going across with OpenReach recently pausing their rollout because they're making such a mess of it, then I think we'll be, the quicker we can get our own network, the safer I'll be able to keep the people in Liverpool. So this is what we're doing. We've got a very good data centre in Liverpool called AIMS. I don't know how many of you know it, but they've got all the NHS qualifications and passed through everything that can go there. And it's a direct peering, so we don't have to send the signal via Manchester or London to get onto the internet, which my colleagues in the NHS like, because it does mean we can then have real-time surgery, etc. And also, we have got a standalone 5G core, so that means that we can use some of the very fast things going forward. So we're currently using the fibre network that's in the ground that most cities have got for their CCTV network. It actually doesn't use very many. There's a lot of fibre in the ground on the CCTV networks that just don't get used. So we're using that. We're putting them up to our CCTV cameras, and then we've got a mesh network, and this is where your small cells come in. I need small cells that can go across the city to get the signals across. And then you can see there's some of the use cases we're using on that. What we found, despite, we were one of the very first councils to take up the 5G, and so we were the target of quite a lot of anti-5G sentiment, shall I say, initially, and we had so despite what the anti-5G lobby say, the signals don't travel very well. So we actually were part of the first testbed and trial, and so we were using millimetre wave as part of to get the, an internet connection into people's homes. But what we found was that, and on this shows you the actual deployment. So we've got the middle of those maps show 2 lampposts that have got millimetre wave, and then that blue area is where we could get the coverage. And as you see, it needed several thousands of those to get a decent ubiquitous coverage around. Whereas if we can put small cells in, which is the far picture there, that red shaded area shows you how far we can get the signal. So we need to have a mixture of both small cell and millimetre cells as well. So there's a pretty picture showing the blue skies in Liverpool. It also shows what we've got on some of the lampposts. So we can see there we've got a LoRaWAN gateway, we've got Wi-Fi, we've got a small cell. And it looks a bit of a mess. So we're trying to make sure, and all you great brains out there, I want one unit that will go on a lamppost that does it all. I want LoRaWAN, I want, because I've still not given up on LoRaWAN, just won't use it instead of phones. So I want LoRaWAN, I want millimetre wave, and we want cellular. So, and I know we're willing to be part of anybody's trials on their new equipment. So what we achieved, we've decreasing the digital divide, which hopefully will improve the health and well-being of residents. When the COVID pandemic hit and nursing homes had to close their doors, there's much publicity about how awful it's been and how many people died in the care homes, and that there was no PPE, etc., etc. One of our care homes was within the trial, and they had 5G, and the manager has told us that he was able to keep the people entertained and connected in their own rooms, so there was no need for them to feel that isolated that they had to go and mix. So he didn't get any COVID in his care home, and he felt that it was the fact that he could have, so we could monitor the activity, and there was 11 films streaming at the same time in each different room. So you'd have somebody watching Die Hard, somebody watching Singing in the Rain, whatever it was, they were all watching what they wanted to watch in their own rooms, and that definitely kept people safe during the pandemic. Saving the LAs and the NHS money are GP surgery bills, for their telephone bills, for want of a better expression, was £9,000 a month pre-pandemic. It shot up to £60,000 a month at the height of the pandemic when everything went virtual. That's unsustainable. That's 2 nurses out of, that's a lot of front line that's getting spent on telecommunications, which we just can't afford going forward. We've had huge problems with education, again, very well documented about how many children have dropped off because within the household there might be mum, dad both working from home, there'll be different age kids all trying to use not only the same device but the same bandwidth, and what we found is that primary school kids have dropped off. So we're working with a primary school in Kensington to give out some Chromebooks, and the head teacher there has identified out of a roll call of just over 300, 149 children who've had no access to using a device or the internet during the pandemic. That's a huge number that are just dropping off. So we're really trying to ensure that we can make sure everybody is involved. So we're not giving the whole of the city free 5G. What we're doing is we're targeting it. So if you're assessed as needing health, social care or an education support, we'll provide it. Because we're working with Telet Research, we can have our own SIM cards. So we've got SIM cards in, we're working with district nurses who are using AI to be able to assess leg ulcers. Leg ulcers is one of the biggest costs in community care. And they can actually monitor whether it's getting better or worse rather than having to guess it, if you like. So we are looking to get the whole of the city covered and have a ubiquitous coverage, and we're then looking to put these SIM cards in with all of our staff, both the council and the NHS locally, to try and reduce the bills. So there's some comments there, and then we're trying to demonstrate what the benefits are. And I think the quote there from the Local Government Association shows it's not just a problem with Liverpool, that tackling the digital divide will be crucial to addressing social and economic inequalities and levelling up every community. So we're working in Kensington in Liverpool, which is the complete socio-economic opposite to Kensington in London. But I've given this talk, sort of something similar, to LGA colleagues, and there were representatives from South Kensington there, and the guy got very agitated because I was implying there was no poverty in Kensington, which I know there is, but he's got 7 streets, we've got miles. So it makes a huge difference, but this type of issue affects everywhere, not just Kensington and Liverpool, but also Kensington in London, as the guy passionately said. So there's my partner in crime, Rosemary Kay. We're a bit interdependent, it doesn't matter, one of us, Rosemary or myself, and we're driving this forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if you look at your paper copies of the agenda, now we've adjusted up here, but we were actually going to have a speaker from King's Cross who's going to talk about station development around the campus. Unfortunately, due to COVID, she can't be with us. But actually, I'm just going to have a quick chat with Vijay, who's going to if you could just give us a couple of minutes in terms of what you found, because you're involved in that solution around King's Cross.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all. Thanks, Simon. Yeah, Vijay Sodiwala, Commercial Director at Wireless Infrastructure Group. So we've been working with Argent since 2016.
when we first when I first actually walked onto the campus. Loads of buildings going up, and actually one of the most sort of phenomenal things that was going on there was that the signal was pretty poor, and it's sort of explainable because there were all these buildings going up all over the place, lots of construction going on, and King's Cross itself was sort of, pretty much a regeneration site. There wasn't a lot going on there. So I got together with the partners, brought along our technical engineering team, and we started having some discussions with Argent Limited partners around what we could do. And it was quite clear from our very first engagement with Argent that they were very keen on ensuring what they were trying to do was to build a community at King's Cross, and in order to build that community, they wanted to make sure that connectivity and communications was sort of, at the top of the agenda. So we started creating, effectively crafted a plan to ensure that connectivity was sort of pretty much holistic across the site. So it didn't really matter which building you were in. It didn't matter whether you were on site, outdoors, whether you were underground in some of the basement and the parking areas. You got the best connectivity that was possible. So we crafted that plan. Obviously, King's Cross itself is about 67 acres. There's around 50 buildings, and they're all sort of multi-tenanted. So you've got sort of restaurants, you've got food and beverage, you've got offices, you've got a university on campus, there are schools. So you've got a whole multiplicity of different venue types, and it was really trying to create a scenario where we could provide best-in-class connectivity to all those buildings, to all those different users in a holistic manner. So I think, is that enough for a synopsis?
It's good because it starts to broaden out the discussion in terms of the sort of campus agenda, which is very useful. So, how did that engagement go in terms of the early stages of the discussion? Was there an appreciation that there's some complexity in terms of giving indoor and outdoor seamless experience? Was there an understanding on the other side?
I guess, Simon, what was going on at Argent, at King's Cross, was there was. I think because it's a campus site and it's very large, what was going on there was that what they didn't want was to have almost like a plethora of solutions deployed, because that's been seen before. You see that in some of the towers that have gone up in the city. Disparate systems, all giving sort of different types of services, providing an inconsistent level of service. And from the outset, as I said, they wanted to create a community. So for them, it was very much about a holistic solution and a consistent level of service, a level of mobile service. So for them, it was very much around what can you do to provide us with a holistic solution. So that's what really drove the agenda. And for them, it was very much around holistic solutions in terms of, in-building and outdoors as well. And so what we said was, let's start focusing on the indoors, and then we can start looking at outdoors. If you solve the indoor problem first, then you can start moving on.
And did, rather like Anne, did they have we don't care whether it's 5G or small cell or whatever, these are, we don't care about your technology. We care about these solution areas, all these use cases.
Yeah, I think, for them it was very much around, we don't really care about what solution you put in. It needs to be holistic. It needs to provide a consistent level of service. You need to work with our master plan, because obviously that site sort of, started, people were in the ground around about sort of 2012 or so, and it's going to carry on until 2027. So, and you need to work with our master plan. As these buildings come up, you need to be providing services into those buildings. So that's really how it was crafted.
Great. Okay, thank you. That just gives a good feel for that location, and we wish Jenny a swift recovery. Just to cover the gap a little bit, so to speak, bridging the gap, as Mark always says. So I've asked Mark Keenan to give us a talk around a very interesting sector for the UK. The stadium venue area is actually very interesting, possibly leading sector for the UK in terms of different deployments and approaches. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks very much, Simon, and good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Keenan, I'm CEO at Real Wireless. We are independent wireless advisors. And I'm here today to talk about Stadium. And behind me are the various environments we've worked in or are working with. Wembley Stadium was the first stadium we worked with, started it with 15, 16 years ago, just before it opened. And we've worked with them continuously since then. And we've seen an evolution of operational and visitor requirements in that time, with multiple upgrades to the system, the mobile system and the radio system that's in that stadium. Likewise with Tottenham Hotspur, where we worked with them since 2013 on the specification and development of requirements for wireless in their new stadium, and we're still working with them today as advisors. There's a number of things in stadia that's important, but for the stadium owners, their prime driver is the operational use of wireless technologies and how that benefits the safety aspects revolving around stadium. And it really has to enhance wireless has to enhance the safe operation of stadia. That's first and foremost what's in people's minds. When we sit in the control room in Wembley Stadium on an event day, that's all the safety officer cares about. He doesn't care about the spectators being able to download videos. That's not his interest. His interest is getting people safely in to the stadium, watching a good event in as much as he can, and then allowing them to remove themselves from the stadium in a safe manner. That's their driver. And that's the baseline of what they want to achieve. So safety and security, staff communications and emergency communications, virtually side by side in what stadium people think about. Below there we've got PMR radio systems, old-fashioned stuff really, pretty basic, but that's what really works consistently and reliably. People in stadia are used to that. Cellular communications and Wi-Fi and IoT, they're coming up as more important elements, particularly as the use of cellular technologies are seen to deliver more things than just cat videos or social media things to spectators. Crowd control and mobile ticketing. Crowd control, actually with radio comms, these are supposed to be short and succinct communications on a radio network. And that's what it generally is. For longer conversations, people use their mobile phones. And it's no different in an operational context in stadia where the event managers and the safety staff, they pick up their mobile phones to speak to each other. It's easy. But the system has got to be capable of supporting their audio comms, and it's primarily audio comms at that point, not data. Wayfinding and facial recognition come in more and more, and we saw during the pandemic, particularly for the Euro 2020 Championships in Wembley Stadium recently, the need for COVID passes, and we also saw how the networks struggled on semi-final and finals day outside the stadium to carry the mobile traffic that was required. And that created quite a big problem for ingress of people, and that's not tolerated by safety people. They want to get people in safely and sensibly. Also at the bottom there, uploads and streaming mobile payments, event information, offers and deals. That's about connecting to the visitors in a more digitized way than perhaps was possible before. Stadia are seeing more and more benefits to them, particularly commercial benefits that are of interest. This image is trying to portray what the digital needs and the digital use of stadia are. Obviously, there's a lot of fixed line requirements in here, LED displays and televisions. And in most modern stadia, you're going to see a lot of images of places where the images of the event that's happening can be replayed or in real time played. Also in here, we've got the three things that are primarily wireless, carried on the wireless networks: the Wi-Fi, the mobile coverage, and the radio communications, traditionally on wireless networks, to a lesser or great extent. We see a lot of stadia that only have Wi-Fi services in the concourse areas, the outer concourse and the inner concourse and the restaurant areas. Very rarely in the bowl. Very few stadia in the UK have Wi-Fi in the bowl. Tottenham is a notable exception to that. Mobile coverage, again, principally required in the concourse and restaurant areas, but more and more in the bowl as well. There's some challenges to get good mobile coverage in a bowl in any environment. There's also quite a lot of cost involved in that. Radio comms, it's the 400 to 450 megahertz spectrum that's used for that. So it goes a long way, penetrates through walls easily. The infrastructure can be cheap and cheerful. And in a lot of cases, it's complemented by the Tetra band for emergency services, which is 380 to 390 megahertz. Goes a long way. There's other things on this that lend themselves to a hybrid solution where wireless could be utilized. It's generally wired today, principally because of reliability, consistency in service. CCTV, they want a consistent service. These are high, certainly in the case of Wembley, where there's 4K camera images streamed across into the control room. One thing that's probably true is if some sort of wireless service could carry real-time images from body cams. You'll see a lot of stewards today with video cameras on their chest. They're taking images, but they have to go back to a room, upload it, and get it to the control room. That can take half an hour to 45 minutes. It's too slow. If a wireless alternative was available, that would be used. In terms of the service models, the wireless industry is very good at making things relatively complex for simple lay users like landlords or stadium owners. There's too many choices out there for them, really. Choices of technology, choices of how it can be implemented, and choices of how it can be maintained over the lifetime of the service. A lot of the time, the landlords don't really appreciate what the technology can do. They've got generally basic requirements, and then there's things that they'd like to know the art of the possible about. And our job as an independent is to work with them to develop their requirements and translate them into a way that the wireless industry can address and deliver to, but also to push the boundaries a little bit with them to get them to understand what the art of the possible of wireless is. So there's three ways of delivering, certainly in building systems in stadia. Traditionally, it was the MNO lead, and when I say traditionally, that's 10, 15 years ago, probably. Today, we very rarely see an MNO lead, unless it's a single operator system, unlikely in a stadium in today's world, because stadium owners realize they want all operators, all technologies in the stadium, not just one. The other one is landlord-owned. Again, very rare today, landlord-owned, certainly where they own it outright. The model that emerged from Heathrow in 2003, 4, 5, that sort of period, landlord-owned. But they have a unique environment with a lot of people going through it, where they can control a lot of space and keep the operators from delivering any type of service from outside in. So they had a lot of power there and still have to this day. And then we've got the neutral hosts. In 10, 15 years ago, there was probably one choice in that area. They've since been merged or taken over in part by Wigan and part by Cellnex now, but there's lots of choices in the neutral house space. So we don't see MNOs wanting to lead on these systems, certainly multi-operator systems anymore. They don't have the capex, or claim not to have the capex, and they certainly don't have the willingness to carry on beyond the initial interaction of and deployment of a system to engage with the other operators and allow the system to grow sensibly. So the market is changing. The MNOs don't want to pay, really, although they will pay in certain circumstances. And again, there's hybrid models emerging where sometimes the landlord pays completely, sometimes the mobile operators pay completely, sometimes there's a hybrid. And we've seen this in all the stadia we've worked with, a variety of models. And over time, I think the neutral hosts will play a greater role where they potentially can bridge the gap between landlords and mobile operators, where private services and public services can be offered on a single network, which will benefit both sides and deliver a service that is reliable and consistent, as Anne said earlier. That's what people want: reliability, consistency. The bells and whistles can follow afterwards. Get the basics right. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Right, and that's interesting because we saw the slide from Caroline earlier showing the neutral host growth over the next few years, and clearly this sector is on the cutting edge of neutral hosts playing in. That's interesting. So we're going to hear from a couple of neutral hosts and hear about the solutions as well that the neutral host can use. So let's go to George. Over to you, who's going to talk on behalf of Crown Castle about neutral host deployments.
Thank you. Well, if I pass out or lose my voice, I'm feeling a little under the weather, but I'll just prop me up and I'll continue.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
There's nothing contagious.
No fever. So, George Aguilera is my name, and I'm going to talk about enterprise host deployments, real-world solutions. As a systems architect, I find that the hard part is to find the key leverage points we can design to and work at so we can maximize the efficacy of the network systems we create. We are also consumers of many of these products that the other folks have been talking about. So, enough about me. Crown Castle is a neutral host provider in the United States. I recall hearing we had a presence in London, actually, many years ago, and we also had some towers in Australia until we sold that portion off later for fiber assets. And in the United States is where we operate. We have over 40,000 towers, 80,000 route miles of fiber, lots of assets, for what we do. And since Crown Castle is a real estate investment trust, so 90% or so of our assets have to be leasable space. So our tower leasing business model is simple, yet can be challenging to implement due to the many jurisdictions in which we operate and due to varying needs of network operators and now enterprise customers as well. Therefore, in our company, we have very bright people in technology, and I think Anne, as and I think someone else mentioned also that we care about technology, but we don't really care about technology. So what we care about is ways to solve, come up with solutions so that we can conduct our business. The Small Cell Forum membership benefits to Crown. We want to know what the business or technology models that are working elsewhere in the world are. I may be wrong, but I believe the DAS specifications started in the UK, actually, and we embraced it in the United States, and perhaps it was also influenced in part by the Femto Forum at some point at the time. I think someone also mentioned JOTS before, the Joint Operator Technical Specification, promoted by the Small Cell Forum for In-Building Agreement between neutral host providers and mobile operators is very interesting. I want to continue to promote it in the United States as it is a technical framework for neutral hosts, mobile operators, and retailers to build trust with each other. And I look forward to the next release with updates to 5G. We might all agree, with I guess some exceptions in competitive information, that sharing ideas is valuable. Although not strictly indoor focused, the chart on the right is about total spending for outdoor small cells through 2025. The CBRS band is shown as a red band that has been growing mostly from 2020 and is forecasted through 2025. Blue is a sub-6 gigahertz, and green is millimeter wave, which we also discuss in this forum from time to time. Now, going from small cell forum to the high-level business case, we looked, Crown Castle, we looked for a certain criteria in what I like to call a customer partner with certain characteristics. We were fortunate to find a customer partner, OEM partners, and mobile operators, though I did not mention mobile operators before because they came later and we already had an idea of what they wanted out of this. And so some of the criteria: strong IT resources, owning premium properties, curious, willing to work with us in developing technology, and 5G in the future. So our customer partner is very valuable, and we work with a routing management company at a property at 345 Park Avenue, which is a ritzy place in Manhattan. And before, we began work before 2021, before the press release that you see to the right. And some of the work that we did was to help prove that LTE 4G works at the CBRS frequency band. It added a bit of credibility, if you will. One of the issues with a new or another flavor of radio technology is having end devices available to receive the signal. So we provided at least some testing with gateways to help them along with that, so that they can adopt it. Actually, let me go back. So we are actually on our second OEM for routing, as the first did not work out as a neutral host provider. So I'm glad that we had the opportunity to work with a customer partner that was patient enough for us to go through all that. The Open RAN 7.2x split, sorry, split 6, is exactly what we were looking for given our hosting model for that location. Now, the drivers for the solution. Some of us debate what drives the need for private network and edge data centers. I have often heard how latency is the driver, low latency, extreme low latency. While that may be true, to date I have seen the concern for data security, thus data not going off the enterprise, has been a driver, well, the driver for routing. It was really about security. Their building management system integrates with all types of IoT. Their analytics and machine learning / artificial intelligence platform has demonstrated it can save power in the long run and in response to emergent events. And emergent event could be something like an earthquake even in Manhattan. I heard a case about that. Enterprise tenants may want similar capabilities for their office operations, maybe as an extension of the building system. Since the buildings have multiple tenants, there are very few common areas where even Wi-Fi access points could be mounted. Even then, sometimes we could only mount our equipment in small janitorial closets. The CBRS band, even at power levels much lower than public 4G or 5G networks, provided enough coverage for the targeted areas. Operators, of course, want to extend their 5 bars of service into high-value buildings, offload capacity from nearby towers. After all, Lower Manhattan is very crowded. And upper floors, which don't really get much signal oftentimes. Our solution was to deliver a network that is future-proof. How many times do we hear that, right? But we did. For 5G and beyond, to address use cases such as integration with the building management or operating system, package delivery tracking while inside the building, occupancy and dwell time data for COVID-19, as well as tracking and taking action as needed, elevator wait times. And then for performance and security, scalability, we placed the distributed units locally on the premises for security as well as for performance. We placed the centralized unit, CU, in our edge data center to support multiple buildings and customers, as well as for scalability beyond that. Here's where we benefited greatly from having a customer partner with a strong IT resource, an existing building operating system or management system, and a willingness to test with us. For our MNO neutral host role, we required a solution that supports multiple carriers. Our solution provides in-building wiring for future mobile operators, though the disaggregated nature of the network required more fiber than we needed for past solutions. We installed fiber and fiber paths to make that accommodation. The hosting model we planned to use outlines our roles, what is shared and what is not shared. Here, the co-location center is the edge data center or nearby point of presence. It is important to note that our demarcation to the MNOs does not include their transport. We pretty much take care of all other aspects, including fiber to the edge data center. I can also distinguish that servers and radio software they may work together, but we treat them separately because we could provide the hardware and another provider can bring in the software. Besides what's located where, the operations and management aspects will come more into play as we get more customers and we provide more value-added services as well. Some of you might recognize this diagram from some work. I took the architecture diagram out of the SCF 245 document, and I modified it to represent our deployed network. Therefore, for more details, please see SCF 245, which is being published this week, I believe, if not sooner. At one point to note is that the backhaul that branches out to each of the respective MNOs does not go through, the CU is in Manhattan, and our management and security center is actually in Pennsylvania. But the MNOs, they do not connect to our facility in Pennsylvania. They branch out directly in Manhattan. I just kept the diagram that way because it is so pretty. And here, what shows in green is what we host. The orange is the private network. Technically, it is a single private wireless network, but APNs are used to route different routing profiles and tenants to different parts of the same overall subnetwork. On the public network side, we pass through MNO PLMN IDs using the MOCN configuration for subscribers to connect to each respective mobile or public network. This SAS DP you cannot see clearly. It's at the bottom of the management and security column. is the Spectrum Access Service domain proxy function for CBRS, which is required to obtain spectrum access grants to channels. That's one of the things that you need when you use a lightly licensed architecture or method of access in the United States. So lessons learned. There are far more lessons learned than this, but I think this is all I can disclose at this time. As often is the case, expectations and not necessarily requirements are often greater than the experience. But we do not know what we do not know until we deploy it, so we learned a lot. Each tenant had a different timeline for implementing the network. In some cases, it took them a while or some time to come around and see the benefit of having a private network. Therefore, enterprise tenant approvals affected the deployment timeline. There are many beautiful marble lobbies and mezzanines in New York City, and some may seem priceless, especially on Park Avenue. We had to be very careful where we mounted the radios, which come in different sizes. The radios come in different sizes, and they cannot always be tucked away in places where they will be rendered ineffective. Therefore, building approvals for antenna mounting and stealthing at times required repeated mock-ups and walkthroughs. Now, neutral hosting can be complicated, where manageable mechanisms are needed to support capacity sharing and allocation, as well as coordination for each MNO to bring their own tracking area codes and access as well. Tags or tracking area codes can be tricky. The way the paging system is designed to find a UE or a cell phone is by using a TAC. However, if something goes wrong, users may end up being locked out from accessing the network for as much as a few hours. So that wouldn't work very well. So each MNO selects its own tax normally. Therefore, we needed to look at how to work with a shared band. We looked at a couple of options. Potentially, one of them was potentially to use a shared TAC, but that would require cooperation from the MNOs. Who would want that, right? Or pass through existing TACs. In either case, some software development needed to be completed before we can make either one work. Provisioning interfaces also needed to be fairly mature when deploying many radios at a time. If we want to deploy in bulk, we need the ability. We can't do scripting. We should be able to upload a lot of units at a time. Also, the right alarms needed to be identified and may require integration work to get a good flow going between the alarm system, alarming, and our network operations centers. More learnings. I hinted at using access point names before. Here they prove useful. Next to limited spectrum, PLM and IDs are also constrained resources. Therefore, we used APNs to differentiate the local private networks while using a single PLM and ID for the overall private network. Then we thought, because we owned a radio access network, are we responsible for emergency services? I know this is very important. It can be. Fortunately, public operators manage their own emergency services like E911. And then what about private networks? We are aware of the new regulations, or that new regulations are coming regarding higher resolution location reporting. However, the Federal Communications Commission regulations in the United States are still evolving, and we just keep an eye on them in case we get thrown in and become more responsible. We have laboratories in which we tested configuration changes and validated requirements and our ability to meet them, actually. And we were able to conduct tests on roaming and MOCN configurations as we searched for the best fit for all of us. And we cooperated with MNOs to validate operator connectivity in different configurations without impacting commercial traffic as well. Then, in summary, looking to the future, we provide for a future-proof wireless network with faster speeds and a better user experience. The Open RAN solution we use will lead to lower total cost of ownership and increased flexibility, and especially scalability in operating the network. We developed a business case around a spectacular customer that is a private network first, but the network is also capable of connecting wireless carriers in a new way that we can all work with. After all, we work with operators to build that trust and iron out the wrinkles. We also provide them with a value proposition for extending their networks onto a platform we are happy to provide. We embrace innovation, and this is one way to promote it. And then I'll perhaps be able to answer.
We'll hopefully have questions at the end. We'll see how we go. Thank you very much for your presentation. So we're starting to hear about, as the forum does, it looks globally and finds case studies, pioneering deployments and case studies, and brings it to the attention of the forum. So thank you, that was very useful to hear from the US. Now Vijay returns to the stage.
Thank you.
Vijay from WIG.
Thank you very much. Thanks again, Simon. What I wanted to do on this session, Simon, was to focus on owner requirements. And I was going to do that based on sort of looking at what happened when the pandemic hit, what our venue partners have been doing as they emerge from the pandemic, and what they're doing in terms of wireless and mobile connectivity as they sort of develop their digital transformation plans. So I was going to do that from the perspective of three sectors. We work in a number of sectors, but the sectors I was going to pick on today were offices, retail, and stadiums. So in terms of offices, so what happened when the pandemic hit? So basically, office vacancy rates shot through the roof. Large and medium-sized enterprises started looking at reconfiguring their office spaces. They wanted to move away from private offices and permanent desks and started looking at a much more collaborative form of working. Consultants, a lot of major consultants, McKinsey and others, started looking at sort of remote working and looked at how productive it could get in terms of working from home. And what happened then? The result was we all started to get on to endless sort of video calls, started getting on to doing those sort of things. And I guess what happened is earlier this year, Statista brought out a report which started talking about the fact that people were getting a bit fed up and couldn't unplug from work, and that wasn't a surprise. So, reduced space within the offices, more hot desking, more collaboration, end result, a much greater emphasis on indoor connectivity, mobile connectivity, wireless connectivity. And I guess that's really what we've seen with our venue partners. This is the Leadenhall building. We worked with British Land on Leadenhall back in 2018, putting in a purpose-built network throughout the building. And what we've seen there is serviced office tenants. They're actually increasing the amount of space they've got in the building, which plays to the fact that obviously there's a lot more sort of collaborative working going on. And also some of the larger tenants that we service there, Aon, Amlin, they've got multiple numbers of floors there. They're all starting to reconfigure their space as well. So that's exactly in line with what we're seeing. Canary Wharf Group, this is another one of our venue partners. And again, so at Canary Wharf, we run an outdoor network and an indoor network within One Canada Square, and also an indoor network in all the shopping centre areas as well. So earlier this year, they brought out a very targeted offering called Made For, aptly named Made For, which is very focused around collaboration and hybrid working. And again, the emphasis there from the CEO, Shobi Khan, and the CIO there, Mark Nallen, basically, again, a great emphasis on indoor connectivity, both wireless and mobile. So these are a few sort of pictures from our office portfolio, and we're starting to see some new and emerging business models coming through. So I've already talked about Leadenhall Building. I've talked about Canary Wharf Group Campus as well. And I mentioned King's Cross earlier on when Jenny wasn't around. We're doing some quite exciting things over at King's Cross with Argent. Argent have a multitude of networks around the site. And what we're looking to do with them is to try and consolidate those multitudes of networks, networks that manage building management systems, that manage a whole host of devices around the site. They look at providing connectivity for events, and we're trying to sort of bring some of those things together for them. The other one I wanted to mention was Media City UK in Manchester. This was one of our earliest networks, and we've got the usual things going on there around sort of extending the network to new buildings as they come up. You know, it's what you tend to do with a campus network. But also with Media City UK, we've got some exciting developments going on. They won the Most Connected Neighbourhood Award, and we're trying to make sure that they maintain that position as they go forward. Moving on to shopping malls now. I mean, there have been some serious challenges. And I guess what's really sort of going on here is really, it's all really about footfall. As you know, sort of footfall's sort of been sort of particularly problematic. And I guess the real issue you've got in terms of footfall is, footfall drives retail sales volume. So that's the metric. Footfall is the metric you need to work on. And I think we've got two sort of big issues going on. I think sort of all of us, you and I, all sort of have got very used to shopping online. And I guess sort of, a lot of us will continue doing that, and that's going to have a drag effect on footfall. I guess the other thing that's going on is the economy. We've got inflation, energy price rises, the war in Ukraine, all of that. Is sort of pretty much reducing disposable income, and that's going to have a dragging effect on footfall. So if footfall is the key driver, what are our sort of venue partners doing around sort of footfall? Well, first of all, you've got to get everyone into the shopping centres. Once you get them there, the focus suddenly shifts on providing what they call sort of an outstanding shopping experience, an outstanding experience within the shopping centre. And what our venue partners are doing really is really just trying to make sure that they have the best connectivity within the centre to enable a whole variety of things. I guess two things in particular. Shoppers, even though they go into a shopping centre, still use a mobile phone to research what they're buying, to share some pictures about what they're buying with friends and family. So there's that whole dynamic going on. So it's really, really important to provide a high-quality indoor experience there. The other thing, mustn't forget the retailers. They're there to pay the rents that the landlords are obviously sort of basing their sort of economics on. And it's really important to have a very good network to support retail transactions, to support what they're doing in terms of loyalty and marketing initiatives and those sort of things. And I guess the point there is sort of those things all sort of go to make an attractive shopping centre, an attractive asset for an asset owner that owns a shopping centre, and that's what drives up the value of the retail asset. That's what everyone's interested in. Again, some examples from our customer base, from our retail portfolio. So we're sort of, we work with about 90% of the UK's busiest shopping centres by footfall. And there's some quite interesting things going on in that space as well, despite the challenging headwinds. So Westfield, yes, we're busy replacing the legacy infrastructure that was put in a few years back to provide a very high quality experience there. But also, the point to make was that's not just what Westfield was really sort of interested in. Yes, they were interested in the shoppers, but actually there's some very interesting things going on within the retail environment there. They're looking at co-working space, they're looking at leisure, they're looking at food and beverages, they're looking at providing sports facilities and gyms. And all of that For all of that, they want to provide a very high-quality indoor experience. Canary Wharf Group, I'll mention them again. We run, so Canary Wharf Group, I don't know if you're familiar, but there are 5 shopping malls underground at Canary Wharf Group. You put them all together, that's probably one of the highest, busiest shopping centres in the UK. We've got a network there that runs up to 4G. And again, Canary Wharf Group, taking George Siritz's point earlier on today, where sort of, 70, I think it was something like 70% of the 5G usage comes from indoors. That's what Canary Wharf want to do. They want to be a leader in the pack. I think that was pretty much what I was going to say there. Yeah, and I guess on Canary Wharf, I mean, they're putting in 5G, and Trafford Centre itself, we're due to go live with 5G in the next couple of months or so. So, onto stadiums now, and Mark's already talked about stadiums, so I'll just sort of pick up on some of the points that he mentioned. So, yeah, fans are back, and they're back in force, as we've seen. But I guess sort of what's been happening is fans have been very used to sort of streaming, lots of online activity, and it's been completely unhindered. They've been doing that from home. I guess when they come back to the stadium, that's what they expect to happen. They expect that unhindered experience to exist within the stadium environment, and that's what the clubs and the stadium operators are effectively sort of dealing with. They need to provide a similar sort of experience. And of course, obviously over the last sort of couple of weeks, we've seen sort of, incidents on pitch, etc. And so things like crowd control, security, all of those things start becoming pretty important. In terms of what football clubs and stadium operators are interested in, it's really about fan engagement and the in-stadium experience. And as far as they're concerned, mobile connectivity is integral to all of that. You've got to, pretty much everyone that goes to a football match sort of brings a mobile phone with them, and what they need to do is they want to make sure that they provide a fantastic experience when they're there. Majority of the fans want to have a very good immersive experience using their mobile phones. And I guess sort of, that's exactly what clubs and stadium operators want to provide. I guess that's also a mechanism for stadium owners and operators. That's a mechanism for them to start putting in things like increasing revenues through food and beverage, through other things such as sort of marketing, loyalty marketing, those sort of things. So we're fortunate enough to be working with some of the leaders in sport, and again, in terms of what's going on, we're doing the usual things over at Anfield with Liverpool Football Club. We're putting in there's a new stand they're developing. We're looking at helping them with that, and the same thing's going on at Lord's Cricket Ground. There are a couple of new stands going up there as well, so we're working with them on that. I guess there are some other interesting things going on. Murrayfield itself, we're looking at the deployment of 5G. Again, they're looking into 5G and how that could actually sort of be deployed, but also being a bit clever about how sort of you actually sort of deploy the technology to satisfy certain use cases, like sort of concerts on the pitch, rather than just focusing the capacity in the stands. So that's pretty much all I was going to say. I wanted to finish up by sort of talking about we live in sort of times where sort of the requirements are continuously evolving, but given they're still evolving, that hasn't really changed what landlords, venue operators, and owners of real estate want from technology. They still want the same things. They still want to work with a trusted advisor, someone that's going to help them to develop the technology and sort of put in the right sort of technology for them. They want to basically make sure that they're working with someone that can give them the right sort of commercials that fit their budgets. They want someone that can put that solution in for them on a turnkey basis and manage that network throughout the life cycle. And lastly, they're generally looking for long-term partnerships whereby you've got a partner that can help them as their needs start evolving. That was it. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you very much. Vijay. Our last presenter before a very short panel, Stuart.
Now, this is Samuel Buttarelli.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, no problem. He was supposed to be presented by my colleague Stuart, but I'm covering for him today. Good afternoon, almost. My name is Samuel Buttarelli. I'm leading the sales and business development team for EMEA and Asia Pac for Commscope. In a very short presentation today, I'm trying to address how we see the in-building wireless market changing and where do we see the opportunity for growing this market. I would start making a comment on looking outside a little bit of the UK, looking across Europe. Clearly, there are changes in the market, but there are also differences country by country. I think, previous presenter have been talking about stadiums. I think that's a great example of how countries are different. We have a large country like Germany and France, where the stadium deployment are fully MNO hosted, so we cap sharing. But of course, there are countries like in UK and others where neutral hosts are taking the lead. But besides the difference across different countries in Europe, I think there are some general trends that are common. First of all, we see a general reduction, if not a complete removal of MNO funding in certain verticals, typically in the enterprise. The end customer demand continue to grow, in particular in this specific vertical where the MNO funding is kind of being removed. And last, clearly, we see tower companies and neutral hosts line up to take over the responsibility for multi-operator deployment, and with the multi-operator requirement now being really a key requirement. So on this trend, how do we see a strategy to address the opportunity to grow? Let me go to the next slide. So we see the strategy relatively simple, based on 3 pillars. Speed of deployment as one, multi-operator support, I just mentioned, as critical one, and also flexibility in the funding model. And I'm trying to briefly touch on each of these 3 pillars. So starting with speed of deployment, 3 elements here. One is the ecosystem, clearly a network of system integrator empowered by mobile network operators to deploy, and neutral hosts are clearly a key element. And neutral host deploying on behalf of mobile network operator is clearly bringing a lot of benefits. It does come with some challenges because each MNOs hold a view on how they wish to deploy. So, and the neutral hosts have to address these, implementing a flexibility in their deployment model. The benefit also in this type of ecosystem, they provide centralized expertise for design, deployment, and potentially management of the systems. For end customers, they have one single interface, to deal with. So, first key element. The second element for speed of deployment is clearly on the technology side, and here small cell are playing a key role. The small cell with the IT-centric architecture, based on standard switches, LAN cabling, is an architecture that resonates very well with end user customers. So what does it mean? This really speed up the approval process, it makes it easier to accept the system, and also from a provisioning standpoint, clearly much faster compared to, for instance, a conventional DAS systems. So third element, and this is on the commercial side, and is a little bit to be discussed, but in our experience, there is a fixed pricing model. So to be specific, basically defining a fixed price based on square foot or square meter is an interesting element. It does come with some exception. In our experience, we have seen this model working very well in some verticals. For instance, carpet enterprise, hospitality. On the contrary, for instance, in hospitals, this model have some challenges and need to be adapted. But in general, where this model is adapted, and we have seen this in particular in North America, is really contributing quite significantly to the overall process in terms of fast deployment. Now, this is just an example on this. This is our one-cell rapid deployment model. This is based on this fixed pricing model. There's a couple of examples in the hospitality sector, but the point here is that from end user initial inquiry to service on air, we got a turnaround of 45 days, so quite impressive. Multi-operator support, as I said from the very beginning, key element, especially for system funded by end user in the enterprise sector. This is a strong requirement. And neutral host, again, are positioned best to support a real multi-operator deployment. They do need some flexibility in their solution. In their small cell solution, they need to have the capability to add a second or third operator in a second phase, or to add a frequency module in the small cell. But provided that they have this flexibility model, is clearly the sweet spot there. Also, in terms of technology, another observation point, as we manage both DAS and small cell, we clearly see these two technologies converging more, and based also on O-RAN interfaces. And we see these convergence really helping to deploy multi-operator systems based on small cell. Of course, having common approved architecture, that is removing MNO's objection is a critical element. I think will be discussed later today in the panel. The JOTH NHAB is clearly a great element. I wish only we could see more of these in our countries outside the UK, because it's really a key factor here. Just as a quick example, how deploying multi-operator small cell here in central London. This is a deployment from Freshwave. And clearly, I think, is a good example where you can see really deployment using small cell as a multi-operator solution. Moving on, and on the flexible funding model, this is another key element, of course, that neutral host can leverage. It is with the terms that they can offer, in terms of a number of years. It is with the modulation or the different split they can do between OpEx and CapEx, starting from full OpEx model, small cell as a service, or different type of combination. And of course, the flexibility that need to handle the technology update, in different phases, also another key element. Lastly, of course, is not always applicable, but in some market and some application, the model can also include a free-to-join for MNOs. This is an aspect where, for non-strategic location, can really help quite a lot to widen the market penetration for small cell deployment. So, in summary, just to finish my quick presentation, as we said, we see in order to grow in this embedded wireless market, these three pillars: speed of deployment to meet the demand that is keep increasing is one. Multi-operator support is now clearly a primary requirement for all the embedded wireless system. And last, as just discussed, flexible funding model really to widen the market penetration. And that concludes my quick overview. I hope I left some time for the panel.
You did, thank you. That's excellent. You recovered a lot of time there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And as a reward for your pace, I'm going to ask you a question. as we start the panel. And I'm not sure whether there's a roaming mic, but I'm happy to take comments. There is a roaming mic, so if people want to chip in, please raise hands. Otherwise, I'm quite happy to hold the stage. Sam, I'm interested in your comment, which I think was it was really in response to the two previous presentations where stadiums were mentioned.
Right.
And you said there's a different dynamic happening here. Very interesting what's happening in the UK, but of course, in other parts of Europe, there's a different philosophy. Do you see a divergence or a convergence in terms of the philosophy around the stadium space? Are operators going to run out of interest in Europe, similar to what they're doing
Right.
in the UK? Or?
I think we are mainly on a convergence path.
Okay.
And in particular, I believe that some of the recent evolution in the tower co, I'm referring to the Vantage Tower, the Totem. So this kind of spin-off will help this country as well to move more and more towards a neutral host model, because clearly there are benefits. I mean, we talk about speed of deployment. An MNO hosted approach clearly takes time. Of course, if you are planning the Olympic in Paris in 2024, you have this time to negotiate between different MNOs. But on different type of venues, you need a faster approach, and this neutral host is clearly. So short answer to your question, I do expect a convergence into the neutral host model.
And I guess, and maybe Mark can support these comments, that my sense is the ecosystem in the UK is interesting. Some of the neutral host companies have been plying their trade for a number of years now, and there's a trusted relationship there, which I think is helping the operators to say, actually, we could deploy here, but the revenue upside looks questionable, and actually there are others who can do it, so we'll work with them. And I think maybe, I don't know, Mark, maybe I'm being overly generous to the neutral hosts, but perhaps that relationship, that symbiotic relationship between the MNOs and the neutral host is working reasonably well in the UK now.
Absolutely. All the neutral hosts will claim to have a good relationship with the mobile operators, and they do have a good relationship with the mobile operators. It's absolutely essential to their base business model. Without that relationship, they really haven't got a business. Yeah. So that has to exist. And to build on the back of that with private enterprise and venues, where there is opportunities for private 5G systems or 4G systems in the future, then that will be a natural evolution for the neutral host to take those on as well.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is, and that's our role as neutral host providers, really, very much to sort of sit there in the middle and make the model work. So sort of we know very well sort of how to deploy the right set of infrastructure for a particular venue, whether it's a stadium or a shopping centre or an office or a hotel. We know what to put in. So the trick really is to do that basically works for everybody. It's got to work for the mobile network operators in terms of sort of what they're prepared to participate in. It's got to work for the venue operators based on budgets, as I said earlier on. And I guess it's got to work for the neutral host service providers as well, because we've got to earn a return on our capital as well.
Yeah. I can see one question emerging over there, but I just one further question, because I think it's interesting in terms of the ecosystem, and we've mentioned through two different presentations, and that wasn't by design, it was just the way it was. I mean, Liverpool came up twice, so you're looking at part of the community in Liverpool who's looking for connectivity. There's a stadium that may not be in exactly the same location, but there's a lot of technology advancing in terms of connectivity and learning there. I wonder whether there's a community city-level oversight there in terms of seeing if there's synergies that can emerge, or if that's still early days in the thinking.
I think that's early days, but I would just like to comment that our network can be sliced and it can be a neutral host. We've tried to have some meaningful conversations with the big guys. One of them wouldn't speak to me, don't know why. But the other one, we've had one company that is quite interested to help them fill their not spots. So rather than going and having an entire city covered, because we're not just talking about the nice shiny buildings, we're talking about the suburbs.
Yeah.
That they will have some not spots. And as you said, there's no financial incentive to go in some of these areas with this latest technology. So if we can, you know, I think the phrase that's being rolled around now is stackable use cases. So that there's more than one use case going in, then it suddenly makes sense. But can I just speak also as a council official that we get approached by, I'm sure many people in this room, and they've all got very good relationships with 1, 2 or 3, but nobody's got a good relationship with all 4. And so we get approached to put in, to have an agreement for lampposts or whatever it is. And exclusivity is starting to wane a bit, but it is still there. And actually, some of the, you know, to get all 4, you need to have quite big cabinets on the road. And actually, they're quite unsightly. And there's a lot of opposition, not on safety of the 5G, but how ugly it is. And would you really want this, that some of these big chests and things that are appearing on the street furniture in your area? And the answer is no. So to you guys out there who are sort of inventing things in a rather simplistic way, we need better looking equipment. We need something that's going to be attractive, not spend the next 5 years getting letters from the public about how awful it looks. So I just would say that the neutral host, it would be great if you could genuinely get everybody to work together.
I think that's certainly something in the real wireless business we see from a number of councils asking about exactly that point. It's a real bone of contention. It can be locally to the community, all these boxes popping up. So yes, message received. Mark, any comments on that? You think?
I think Dean's desperate to ask a question.
Dean is desperate. I was trying to hold Dean back, but I can't see anyone else beating Dean to the. Oh, there's one over there, but unfortunately Dean's got the mic, so he's there first.
I think there's a second mic.
Dean, over to you.
This ties back to the Ericsson presentation, which is we've got deals between neutral hosts and the MNOs for things like indoor coverage and capacity. But how are we going to get a relationship for quality, QoS, slicing, anything like that, across that boundary between the MNO and a neutral host? Can they give guarantees so that my super duper gaming service works in this room on the DAS?
Yeah, okay, this way it works. Yeah, okay, good. No, I think that is essential that needs to get in place, and there is no like technical challenges. I think it's all about setting up those collaborations and make it happen. So you can do network slicing. You can do quality of service, partitioning, through those neutral host driven systems. And by that, you can also set up SLAs that can be fulfilled.
So this really gets into the software layer and the commercial, techno-commercial discussion in effect. I mean,
yes, exactly.
The technology, the underpinning technology will support. So I did see, George, you were getting a little bit excited there. Is that something that you've come across in your deployment, where trying to work out the slicing or the different needs of the different users of the network is starting to become a consideration for you in your US deployment that you talked about? How do you make sure that all different users of the system are happy with their level of service?
I can say 2 things to that. One is there is a natural conflict between MNOs and enterprises, and I think enterprises have a lot more use cases. And an MNO wants to deliver a slice network. An enterprise wants a slice application. And so bringing them together, you've got to work hard at your relationships, to make it work on the same platform as a neutral host provider. Yeah. Luckily, that's what neutral hosts excel at.
Yep. Okay.
I think that's both items.
Yeah. So that's the USP, or one of the USPs around. In fact, the neutral host competes around how they facilitate that sort of interesting techno-commercial environment. There was somebody in, yes, there we go, gentleman in the middle. Could you let us know who you are?
Yes, please. Okay. I have a question, a bit legal and business. if I have a current neutral host, let's say hospital or a school, and they want to install a new private, corporate, or enterprise network, okay? This, again, it will be conflicting with the investment of the MNOs. They invested a lot, or the neutral host, he claims that he will bring them a lot of traffic, a lot of users. Now we are stealing some of their users, some of their applications. So have you seen something like that? How to settle it? This is a case that I'm facing now.
It's very interesting. So, I mean, I'll focus on rather than the general discussion, so the health sector, and in particular hospitals was the environment you were mentioning, where there's an interesting...
There is a private network, 5G private network. I want to offer it to them.
Okay. Anyone aware of...
We obviously are being approached by the 6 hospitals in Liverpool, and we're focusing on the community services, but we are under pressure from some parts of the NHS to make sure that the free connectivity is available for them because of the costs of the data that they're incurring, that they're wanting to reduce it. But I do stress that our network is private, and we can slice it. But we can become a neutral host, but we're not really planning to take over that part of the world, if you know what I mean. We're only really interested in making sure. But what has come about is that the MRI scans in the UK, the COVID pandemic has really, really set back the health service considerably. So we've now got 6,000 people who should have had a scan over the last 2 years who didn't. So there's a huge backlog. So what they're trying to do is to get as many people to go through the machines and then for the details to be shared remotely. Well, that actually costs currently in the current market a lot of money. So there's a lot of pressure to try and use our solution, which is our own private network, to get that to go amongst the community GPs so that they can access things quicker. And they're looking at virtual wards, which means you need better connectivity, more reliable, because you need, if it's life critical. So, for example, the latest cancer treatments that are really working very well are immunologies. And that's basically where, and it literally can kill or cure you. So some soft cell cancers, particularly lung cancer, which previously was seen as a bit of a death sentence if you got a grade 4 cancer, but actually now can be resolved, you can be cured with immunology if your body can take it. But to get to that state, you need to be monitored every 4 hours for 6 weeks. And we can't keep people in hospital for 6 weeks just being monitored in that way. But you can be monitored remotely if you've got a reliable enough system, if you've got something that will keep going. I mentioned the analog switch off. So as more and more people go, at the moment, the MNOs, SLAs are best endeavour, more or less. And so you can't guarantee that. We've got a 4-hour guarantee, and we're working to develop an 18-hour guarantee, both for the equipment and for the network if there's a power cut, so that we can try and keep, but also we know where everybody is. So BT today might well be supporting some people in very serious conditions, but they don't know where they are. They've just got customers. And it's very difficult for them then, when something goes wrong with their network, to actually hone in and keep that person safe. And that's what we're trying to do. So the hospitals are also wanting that, because the hospital staff will be monitoring these virtual wards, and so they want to be part of it. But we need to have, and I know Simon and others are working on standards, we do need to actually work together, because it does feel, as an outsider in this world, it does feel all a bit proprietary. So it feels like I'm a BT person over here, I'm a Vodafone person over there, and they don't really want to work that closely together. They talk about it, but in reality, when you say, we've got one lamppost, it becomes difficult.
It's fascinating. Mark, I think you're going to chip in there.
Yeah, it was interesting the way that question was phrased. It brought me back to the time when Wi-Fi and GSM were emerging, 3G were emerging. and they were perceived to be competitive to each other. So if you do this, then the other one's going to suffer. They don't suffer. They're complementary. As we go forward, 5G will be complementary. The mobile operators will get connected to the systems that they want to because their customers are in the building or in the location that they want to serve. And if they don't serve those customers, the customers will move to somebody else who will, probably another mobile operator. But there will still be space on that infrastructure to deliver private services that meet the specific and demanding requirements of an operational use.
Yeah.
And when Dean said, will you give this guarantee of service? In a stadium environment, if you're going to deliver wireless services to stewards at turnstiles, you've got to guarantee that it will reach them.
Absolutely.
No, it'll work next week. It has to work now, clearly. And likewise, in Anne's situation, these services need to be guaranteed. Otherwise, we'll find a solution elsewhere. It might not be a wireless solution, but it will be a solution that will be fit for purpose.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I'm hitting my time warning, so unfortunately I'm going to have to curtail the discussions which were just starting to warm up there. So thank you very much to the panel for sitting so patiently for 2 hours. It's very good of you. And thank you to the audience as well. Everyone's sitting here still and engaged in the discussion. So, but I'm looking for an indication in terms of something I need to announce, other than lunch.
Oh, can I just? It's Jonathan Lisher from Sercom here. I just want to ask the panel, what impact do you see from rising energy costs in the transition to neutral host and shared infrastructure? Because surely that's sort of key now, one of the key elements within the MNO environment. There are actual operational energy costs at the moment, which are more than doubling.
Okay, so you're asking about energy consumption of shared infrastructure, yeah?
Well, there's definitely, you can prove on a neutral host infrastructure a potential 40% saving in a 5G environment. So surely, well, I mean, what is the appetite? Are mobile operators, are they beginning to focus more on the energy costs and so therefore might be more open to moving to shared infrastructure?
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. Let's just, a quick one. Hans, are you able to just deal with that in a minute before we break for lunch?
Yeah, sure.
Appreciate it.
No, of course, I mean, if you share the infrastructure and if you can share it in a way so that you actually don't have to put up like separate equipment for all the four, then of course there is a huge saving. So that will definitely accelerate the deployment of shared networks. I think that is clear.
Super. Okay, and we got one more.
Very, very quickly.
It's
yeah.
a good question. Clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean that's the number one agenda item: ESG, environmental sustainability, governance. So on that, certainly what we're doing is we're obviously shared infrastructure means less energy consumption, but we're also doing mobile network operators and deploying small cell technologies, small cell radios that have a much lower energy footprint.
Great. Okay. So, although it wasn't a hot topic this year, we may revisit it next year in the agenda. I must catch up with you after because it's also close to my heart. The green radio story, which has been championed in the UK for a number of years, actually. Okay. Right. So we really are breaking for lunch now. Thank you for that question. Thank you, everyone.